She felt the wind before she heard the gunfire. Hot, dry, carrying dust and diesel and something older than fear. Why did it always feel like the world warned you just seconds before everything went wrong? Lieutenant Sarah Brennan lay flat against the Afghan ridgeline, her body pressed into stone baked white by the sun. 50 feet below her position, the Barrett stretched forward like a promise she had made 6 years ago over a folded flag. The scope revealed a valley frozen in the moment before disaster. 8 American operators pinned in a dry riverbed, 3 armored vehicles forming a steel crescent, infantry closing in, slow and patient, like wolves that already knew the hunt was over. She didn't need to count seconds. She counted heartbeats. Her finger rested beside the trigger guard. Not yet. Her radio crackled. Overwatch, this is Viper 6. We are heavily engaged. Multiple armored vehicles, approximately 60 hostiles. We are pinned down. The voice belonged to Commander Jake Hartley. Calm, controlled, practiced. The kind of voice that had carried men through hell and brought them back alive. She answered smoothly. Viper 6, I have eyes on your position. Infantry advancing from your 3 and 9. I can provide precision fire. There was a pause. Then the words came, heavy, dismissive. Negative, Overwatch, hold position. We're calling in air support. Sarah's jaw tightened. Air support meant time. Time meant blood. Through her scope, she watched one of the operators drag a teammate behind cover. The wounded man's leg left a dark trail in the sand. Too dark, too fast. She did the math in her head. 7 minutes, maybe less. She keyed the radio again. Viper 6, I can disable the lead vehicle, open an escape route. I said negative, Hartley replied. This requires precision we can't risk. Risk? She had heard that word her entire career. Translation, I don't trust you. She swallowed it and stayed still. And as the SEAL team fought for inches below her, her mind drifted backward to another room, another silence, another moment where everyone had decided what she was before she ever spoke. The briefing room had smelled like burnt coffee and skepticism. She had been the only woman at the table, again. Hartley had stood at the front, confident, authoritative, already leading men who trusted him with their lives. When his eyes found her, something flickered, recognition maybe, but not acceptance. With all due respect, he'd said, I have concerns about this assignment. She had let him speak. She had learned long ago that interruption only made men defensive. My qualification scores. I'm aware of your scores, Lieutenant, he cut in. I'm also aware you weigh 120 pounds and this will be your first direct action mission. She felt the room close in. If experienced men freeze, what chance does a woman have? The implication never needed to be spoken. Colonel Davis had intervened later, quietly, privately. He had told her about her brother, about Fallujah, about a sniper named Tommy Brennan, who had held a position alone so 18 Marines could escape. I couldn't save him, Davis had said, but maybe I can honor him. She hadn't asked for that weight, but she carried it anyway. Now, 6 years later, she lay on a ridge with the same stillness her brother had taught her when she was 10 years old, holding a rifle too big for her arms. The world between heartbeats. She found it again. Her radio crackled once more. Air support is 12 minutes out. The wounded man below didn't have 12 minutes. She made her decision. She switched channels. Colonel Davis, request permission to engage armored target. Static. Hartley's voice cut in sharp. Lieutenant Brennan, stand down. Then Davis's voice, hard as stone, take the shot. The chain of command cracked like glass. Sarah settled behind the Barrett. Wind, temperature, distance, drift. 70%. She exhaled. The trigger broke clean. The rifle roared. 2 seconds later, the lead armored vehicle became fire. Steel erupted. Ammunition cooked off. The turret lifted into the air like a toy tossed by an angry god. The crescent shattered. And in that moment of stunned silence, the enemy line broke open. Hartley's voice returned, stripped of disbelief. The line just collapsed. "Move now," Sarah said softly. She didn't smile. She worked. She fired again and again. Each shot bought seconds. Seconds bought lives. Helicopters came in low. The wounded were lifted first, always the wounded first. Then the reinforcements arrived. More fighters, more vehicles. And then something changed. She felt it before she saw it. The enemy stopped pushing the SEALs. They turned. They were hunting her. She didn't tell the team. Some problems belonged to the person who created them. She broke down her position and moved. The chase began. They were good, organized, patient. She was injured, alone, running out of time. The ravine came out of nowhere. She slipped. The impact stole the air from her lungs. Pain flared white. Her rifle cracked, the scope shattered. Blood ran down her temple. She laughed once, short, humorless. Figures appeared above her, weapons raised. She rolled into cover as bullets shredded stone. Her radio crackled. "Overwatch, what's your status?" She tasted copper. "Mobile," she said, delayed. Hartley's voice came back different now. Not command, not doubt. Concern. "I'm not leaving you." She moved again, slower, smarter. 1 round, 1 kill, relocate. She broke their confidence, not their bodies. Fear spreads faster than bullets. The extraction zone came into view. So did the gunner. He aimed not at her, but at the helicopter. Sarah stopped running. She dropped to one knee. Iron sights, shaking hands. The world narrowed. The space between heartbeats opened. She fired. The gunner fell. She ran. Hands pulled her into the aircraft. The rotors lifted. She collapsed onto the floor, breathing dust and oil and relief. Rodriguez was alive. Hartley knelt beside her. "That was the dumbest, bravest thing I've ever seen." She smiled weakly. "Can't have you looking bad, sir." The flight home was quiet. Pain settled in. So did faces. She didn't regret the shots. But she carried them. That night under Afghan stars, she called her mother. "I'm proud of you," her mother said. "Not of the medals. Of the choice." Days later, she sat in another briefing room. Same seat, same maps. Different silence. This time, no one doubted why she was there. Hartley spoke her name without hesitation. She was Overwatch. She was trusted. And somewhere between the ridgeline and the extraction, between doubt and decision, Sarah Brennan had learned something her brother had always known. Sometimes strength doesn't shout. Sometimes dignity doesn't explain. Sometimes it lies still, breath held, waiting for the moment when action is the only language left. And when that moment comes, it acts. Why did the silence after the explosion feel louder than the blast itself? For a moment after the armored vehicle erupted, the valley didn't move. No shouting, no gunfire, just smoke rolling upward and heat shimmering through it, as if the earth itself needed a second to understand what had just happened. Sarah Brennan kept her eye to the scope. She didn't allow herself relief. Relief was a luxury that came later, if it came at all. Below her, the SEALs were still alive, still pinned, still surrounded by men who now understood that something had gone very wrong. The second armored vehicle slewed sideways, its driver overcorrecting, the turret swinging uselessly as the crew tried to find a threat they couldn't see. The third began revering, instinct overpowering training. Infantry scattered, some dropping flat, others firing wildly at shadows and rocks. Fear had entered the equation. Holy, Hartley's voice cut off mid-thought, then returned, controlled but raw. The line just broke. Sarah exhaled slowly. Move now, you have an opening, I'll cover. She didn't wait for confirmation. Her crosshairs slid left, settling on a man shouting orders behind a chunk of collapsed masonry. Squad leader. She recognized the posture, the way others oriented toward him without looking. She squeezed. The man dropped, the shouting stopped. That wasn't heroism, it was math. Every second the SEALs remained in that riverbed increased the odds someone else would bleed out. Every coordinated enemy movement reduced their chances of extraction. Her job wasn't to be impressive. It was to be useful. She fired again. A machine gun team had set up behind a burned-out truck, trying to establish suppressive fire. She took the gunner first. The assistant froze, hands hovering, not quite ready to accept that the role had just been inherited. She gave him 3 seconds. He didn't use them. Another shot, another body. The radio crackled constantly now. Short, clipped calls. Controlled urgency. The sound of professionals working under pressure. Rodriguez was being moved. Sarah saw it through the scope, the careful, practiced way 2 operators lifted him, one covering, one dragging, one more scanning the perimeter. His face was pale, eyes half-lidded, but he was still breathing. Still alive. She felt something tight in her chest loosen by a fraction. Then the sound changed. It wasn't gunfire. It was engines. Sarah shifted her scope north. Dust plumes, fast-moving, purposeful. Reinforcements. Viper 6, be advised, she said calmly. Multiple vehicles inbound from the north. 2 armored, 2 technicals. Estimate 40+ fighters. Hartley didn't hesitate. Copy, we can't hold here. You won't have to, Sarah replied. I'll slow them. She didn't say how. She didn't need to. The lead technical crested a shallow rise, bouncing hard, the mounted gun swinging wildly as the driver pushed speed over control. The gunner stood tall, scanning, overconfident in distance and numbers. Sarah waited. The shot wasn't about skill, it was about patience. At the top of the rise, the vehicle slowed just enough. She fired. The gunner vanished backward, armor defeated as if it were cloth. The technical swerved, overcorrected, and disappeared into a ditch. The second vehicle hesitated. That hesitation mattered. She took the next gunner seconds later. Now they knew. Now they understood. The reinforcements spread out, infantry dismounting, vehicles zigzagging, trying to identify her position without giving her a clean shot. Smart. Too smart to underestimate. Sarah checked her ammo count. 9 rounds left. She didn't think about what that meant yet. She focused on the task directly in front of her. Blackhawks inbound, Hartley reported. 4 minutes. Understood, she said. I'll keep them busy. She did exactly that. Every time a group tried to mass, she broke it. Every time someone thought they were safe behind distance or terrain, she corrected the assumption. She wasn't everywhere. But she was enough. The helicopters came in low, rotors whipping the valley into chaos. The SEALs moved fast, practiced, wounded first, then the rest. Sarah watched them board, one by one, counting heads like a ritual. 8 in. All 8. Her throat tightened, unexpected and sharp. She'd done it. Then she saw the shift. The enemy stopped advancing on the extraction zone. They turned their attention uphill. Toward her. She recognized the change immediately. The way a group detaches not to pursue but to hunt. 15 men peeled off, moving with discipline, not anger. Their leader stood out even at distance, tall, deliberate, radio clipped to his vest. Professional. This wasn't revenge. This was problem-solving. She didn't tell Hartley. Not because she didn't trust him. Because she did. Because if she said the words, he'd come back. And he couldn't. Not with a wounded man on board. Not with fuel limits and enemy numbers rising. Some risks belong to the person who created them. She keyed the mic. Viper 6, birds are lifting. Copy, Hartley replied. Secondary bird inbound for you, 15 minutes. 15 minutes. She glanced at the valley. The hunters were already moving. Understood, she said. She broke down her position fast, methodical even as adrenaline pulsed through her veins. Rifle secured. Brass policed out of habit more than necessity. She moved low along the ridgeline, keeping below the skyline, using stone and shadow. She heard voices behind her. Closer. They were good. She reached the ravine without realizing it was there, until the ground dropped away beneath her boots. She didn't scream when she slipped. She didn't have the breath. Pain exploded through her back and head as she hit hard, the impact rattling her teeth, her vision flashing white and gray. For a moment, she lay still, staring up at the sky, trying to remember how breathing worked. Blood ran warm down her temple. She sat up too fast. The world tilted. Not ideal. She checked the rifle. The scope was gone. Shattered. The stock cracked. She swallowed. Okay, she whispered to no one. Okay. She heard them above her now. Shouts, orders, the scrape of boots on stone. Bullets chipped rock as she rolled into cover. Her radio crackled. Overwatch status. She took a breath that tasted like dust and iron. Mobile, delayed. Hartley didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was different. No edge, no doubt. I'm not leaving you. Something in her chest tightened again, this time not from fear. Sir, she said quietly, get your team home. There was a pause. Then move toward the LZ. I'll hold the bird. She pushed herself up. Every step sent pain through her skull. Her calf screamed where shrapnel had torn flesh. Her shoulder burned from recoil and impact. She moved anyway. The hunters followed. She bought time the only way she knew how. One shot. One body. Relocate. Repeat. Her world shrank to choices measured in seconds and meters. She didn't think about her brother, not consciously. She didn't think about medals or doubts or proving anything. She thought about not stopping. The landing zone came into view just as the Blackhawk flared in. Gunfire erupted behind her. Then she saw him, the gunner lining up on the helicopter's tail. She stopped running, dropped to one knee. The rifle felt heavier than it ever had. The iron sights wavered. Her breath stuttered. Then, like a memory opening a door, the noise faded. The space between heartbeats returned. She fired. The gunner fell. She ran. Hands grabbed her, pulled her aboard, the aircraft lifting before her boots fully cleared the ground. Inside, noise and motion blurred together. She collapsed against the deck, chest heaving, blood soaking through her sleeve. Hartley crouched beside her, gripping her shoulder. You did it, he said, all of it. She closed her eyes. Not because she was tired. Because for the first time since the briefing room, since Arlington, since she'd promised herself she wouldn't quit. She believed it. Why did the hardest moments always come after the gunfire stopped? Sarah Brennan woke to the rhythmic thump of rotors and the metallic taste of blood at the back of her throat. For a few seconds, she didn't know where she was. The world swayed, light and shadow sliding across the ceiling of the helicopter as if she were underwater. Then pain reminded her. It wasn't sharp, it was deep, settled, the kind that told you something had gone wrong and decided to stay. She tried to move her left arm. It responded, slow but intact. Her right leg burned, wrapped tight, pressure doing its job. Someone had done clean work on her while she was out. "Easy," a voice said. She turned her head slightly. Hartley sat across from her, helmet off, sweat streaking through dust on his face. His eyes never left her. "Did we lose anyone?" she asked. Her voice came out rough, like it had been scraped raw. Hartley shook his head. "Not today." She exhaled, long and shaky, and only then realized she'd been holding her breath since she'd woken up. The medevac was quiet after that. Not awkward, just heavy. Every man aboard carried his own version of the last hour, some of them still shaking with adrenaline, others staring at nothing, replaying moments they'd never talk about out loud. Sarah stared at the floor. She felt the weight of what she'd done settling into her bones. Not pride. Responsibility. Back at the forward operating base, the world returned in pieces. The smell of antiseptic, the hiss of IV lines, boots passing in the hallway, voices dropping when they noticed she was awake. A corpsman stitched her leg while she focused on breathing through it. No drama, no sympathy, just work. When it was done, she lay back, exhausted, staring at the canvas ceiling. This was usually the moment it hit. The shaking, the questions, the if onlys. They didn't come. Instead, she felt empty. Like the part of her that had been holding tension for years had finally let go, and now there was nothing underneath it yet. The door flap rustled. She didn't look up at first. "You going to keep pretending you're asleep?" Hartley asked. She smiled faintly, thinking about it. He pulled up a chair and sat, not across the room, not looming, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes too. "I owe you an apology," he said. She kept her gaze on the ceiling. "You don't." "I do," he replied. "I didn't trust you, not because of your skill, because of my own assumptions." That got her attention. She turned her head slowly. "You weren't wrong to be cautious." He shook his head. Cautious is one thing. Dismissing someone before they ever get the chance is another. Silence stretched between them. "I've led men for 20 years," he continued. "I thought I knew what competence looked like. Today proved I had blind spots." She studied his face, searching for ego, defensiveness, anything false. There was none. "You trusted me when it mattered," she said quietly. "Yes," he agreed, "and I almost didn't." That admission sat heavier than praise ever could. "Rodriguez is stable," he added. "He asked about you." She closed her eyes, relief washing through her like a second wave. "Good." The flap opened again. Colonel Davis entered without ceremony, his presence shifting the room immediately. He didn't smile, didn't frown, just nodded once. "Lieutenant," he said, "you saved 8 operators and disrupted a coordinated armored assault with a single rifle." She sat up straighter despite the pain. "I followed protocol, sir." Davis studied her for a long moment. "You followed judgment." He handed her a folded piece of paper. "Orders, reassignment." She scanned it once, then again. "Overwatch lead." "Permanent." She looked up. "Sir." "You've earned it," he said. "Not because you're exceptional, because you're reliable." The words hit harder than any medal. Reliable meant they put lives under her watch. It meant trust. After Davis left, Hartley stood. "I'll see you at the briefing," he said. She nodded. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the ravine, the shattered scope, the gunner lifting his weapon. She sat up, breathing hard, the room dim and quiet. She reached into her pack and pulled out the folded letter she carried everywhere. The edges were soft from years of handling. Her brother's handwriting. He'd written it before Fallujah, back when everyone still pretended the war made sense. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. I'm okay with that. I just don't want you carrying my fear as your own." She read the line she always read. Survive with purpose, not guilt. She folded the letter carefully and lay back. The next morning, the briefing room felt different. Same map, same coffee, same dust. Different posture. She took her seat at the table. No one looked surprised this time. No one questioned her presence. When she spoke, they listened. Not because she demanded it. Because she'd earned it. The mission was simple on paper: escort, surveillance, high-value target confirmation. Nothing was ever simple. As they geared up, Hartley paused beside her. Overwatch, he said, not as a call sign, as a title. She nodded once. As the convoy rolled out, Sarah watched the horizon, rifle steady, breathing even. She felt the old anxiety stirring, the quiet voice that asked what if today was the day luck ran out. She acknowledged it. Then she set it aside. Fear wasn't weakness. Ignoring it was. The village came into view. Mud brick structures, narrow alleys, children disappearing at the sound of engines. She scanned rooftops, windows, doorways. Everything looked calm, which meant nothing was. Her finger rested near the trigger, not tense, not relaxed, ready. This was her place now. Not the spotlight. Not the speech. The moment between chaos and consequence. And as the convoy moved forward, Sarah Brennan understood something she hadn't before. Redemption wasn't about erasing doubt. It was about standing steady when doubt returned and choosing to act anyway. Why did calm always feel like a lie right before everything unraveled? The village looked peaceful from a distance, too peaceful. Sarah Brennan watched it through her scope as the convoy slowed at the edge of the dirt road. Morning light washed over mud brick walls and rusted tin roofs, turning the place almost gentle. A goat wandered between buildings. Laundry stirred in the breeze. Normal. Which meant nothing. She adjusted her position on the Overwatch ridge, easing her weight so the rock beneath her didn't shift. Her breathing stayed slow, controlled. She had learned long ago that anxiety didn't arrive loud. It slipped in quietly, disguised as instinct. And instinct was speaking now. Convoy entering village perimeter. Hartley's voice came over the radio. Overwatch, talk to me. I don't like the quiet, she said. No civilians visible past the first structures. Windows are closed. Copy, Hartley replied. We proceed. They always proceeded. She tracked the lead vehicle as it rolled forward, tires crunching gravel. Operators scanned sectors, weapons low but ready. Good spacing. Good discipline. Then she saw it. Movement that didn't fit. A second-story window. Just a flicker of shadow pulling back too fast to be accidental. Her pulse ticked up. Possible contact, second story, building left of main road, she said. Stand by. She waited. Nothing happened. 10 seconds, 20. The convoy moved deeper into the village. Her jaw tightened. She hated this part, the waiting, the moment when instinct screamed and evidence lagged behind. She didn't fire. Not yet. A child ran across the street, barefoot, laughing, chased by another. They disappeared into an alley. Her stomach twisted. If something happened now. She scanned again, slower, forcing herself not to chase fear. That was the line she walked every mission, between caution and overreaction. Then the first shot rang out. Not at the convoy. At her. Stone exploded inches from her face as the round struck the rock beside her head. She rolled instantly, training overriding shock, heart slamming as rounds snapped over her position. Contact, Overwatch taking fire, she barked. Below her, the village erupted. Gunfire from rooftops, from alleys, from behind walls that had been quiet seconds earlier. The convoy scattered into cover. Ambush, ambush, Hartley shouted. Sarah crawled behind a boulder, breath fast now, adrenaline flooding her system. She pressed her cheek to the rifle stock, scanning uphill, finding the shooter who'd taken the first shot at her. He was good. Hidden well. She found him by patience, not movement, a shape that didn't quite match stone, a shadow that stayed too still. She fired. The threat ended. But the village was alive now, enemy fighters pouring out of concealment, firing down into the street. She began working. One rooftop, one window, one threat at a time. Not heroic. Necessary. She called targets, gave angles, warned of flanking movement. Her voice stayed calm even as bullets cracked around her. Inside, something else stirred. Anger. Not at the enemy. At herself. She felt it, the wrongness, and she hadn't stopped it in time. A flash of memory cut through her focus. Another village, years ago, her brother describing how calm meant danger. If it's too quiet, Sarah, that's when you worry. She swallowed. This wasn't about guilt. She wouldn't let it become that. She adjusted fire and kept going. The fight stretched long and ugly. Dust choked the air. Smoke blurred sightlines. The SEALs held their ground, moving with brutal efficiency, but they were boxed in. Then she heard the words she didn't want. Rodriguez is hit again. Her breath caught. Not him. Not again. She scanned frantically, searching for the source. Found it, a shooter positioned behind a water tower, elevated, well protected. A smart angle. Too smart. She lined up the shot. Wind gusted. She waited. The shooter leaned. She fired. The body fell out of view. Threat down, she said, her voice steady though her hands trembled. Minutes dragged by like hours. Eventually, the enemy began to break. Not retreat, scatter, melt back into the village, abandoning positions as the cost outweighed the gain. Silence crept back in. Not peace. Just aftermath. The convoy regrouped. Wounded were stabilized. No fatalities, barely. When the all-clear finally came, Sarah leaned back against the rock, exhaustion crashing over her in a heavy wave. Her hands shook now that she allowed it. She didn't like how close that had been. She didn't like that her instincts had been right, and still not enough. Back at base, the debrief was quiet. No raised voices, no blame. Those were the ones that stayed with you. Afterward, she sat alone outside the medical tent, watching the sun dip low, turning the dust in the air gold. Hartley approached without a word and sat beside her. "You saw it," he said after a moment. "Yes," she replied. "I hesitated." "You verified," he corrected. "That's not the same thing." She shook her head. "If I'd spoken sooner." He cut her off gently. "We don't play the if game, it eats people alive." She knew that. Didn't mean the thought stopped. "I keep thinking I'll get better at knowing," she said quietly. "That one day instinct will be enough." Hartley looked at her. "Instinct gets you to ask the question. Judgment answers it. You did both." She didn't respond, because part of her still wondered how many times judgment would be enough. That night she cleaned her rifle slowly, methodically. The ritual steadied her. As she worked, she thought about the people in that village. The children, the hidden guns, the way war folded itself into everyday life until you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. She didn't feel victorious. She felt responsible. Before sleep, she wrote in her notebook, just one line. "Awareness without action is fear. Action without awareness is recklessness." She closed it and lay back. Tomorrow would come. Another mission, another decision, another moment where calm would pretend to be safe. And when it did, she knew she would listen. Not just to the fear, not just to the training, but to the quiet space where both met. Because strength wasn't certainty. It was choosing anyway. knowing you might still be wrong, and carrying that weight without letting it crush you. Why did survival start to feel heavier than fear? The weeks after the village blurred together, not because nothing happened, but because too much did. Missions stacked on missions. Nights bled into mornings. The war didn't escalate so much as it tightened, like a knot pulled 1 inch at a time. Sarah Brennan felt it in the way men spoke less between operations, in how laughter disappeared first, then small talk, then even complaints. Silence, she had learned, was never empty. She lay prone on another ridge, another dawn breaking pale and unforgiving, the cold seeping through her gear and into her bones. Below her, the terrain unfolded in familiar patterns, paths worn by feet and tires, clusters of stone, the geometry of conflict etched into land that didn't belong to it. Her breathing was steady. Her mind was not. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours in days. Every time she closed her eyes, the world returned in fragments. Rodriguez's blood on sand, the ravine, the gunner's body dropping out of sight. Not nightmares. Worse. Memories. She adjusted her position, checking angles, distances, lines of fire. The work kept her anchored. The work always did. Overwatch, confirm visual on target compound, Hartley said over the radio. Confirmed, she replied. Single story, eastern wall reinforced. 2 guard rotations irregular. Copy, we move on your mark. She paused. Something tugged at her attention, not danger exactly, but imbalance. A rhythm offbeat, a detail that didn't quite fit. She scanned again. The guards were too relaxed, weapons slung low, body language loose. They're expecting us to look elsewhere, she said slowly. Hartley absorbed that, you seeing a secondary threat. Not yet, she answered, but I feel it. He trusted that now. Hold, he ordered the team. Minutes passed. Then she saw it. A figure moving low along a rear wall, not armed like the others, smaller, careful. A child. Her stomach dropped. Hold position, she said sharply. Non-combatant moving through rear sector. The figure paused, then vanished inside the compound. Sarah's pulse quickened. Children didn't belong near target sites unless someone had put them there. Overwatch, Hartley said quietly. Advise. She hesitated. This was the moment that never made it into mission reports. The split second where training met reality and neither offered a clean answer. Delay, she said. Something's wrong. Before Hartley could respond, the compound exploded outward, not from the center, but from the walls themselves. Hidden charges detonated, sending debris and fire into the open ground. The ambush had been set for them. The child hadn't been a victim. They'd been a trigger. Gunfire erupted. Fighters poured out of concealed positions, screaming, coordinated, ruthless. Sarah felt something break inside her chest, not panic but rage. Cold, focused, dangerous. She worked the rifle with brutal precision, eliminating threats as they revealed themselves, calling positions, guiding the team through chaos. But part of her mind stayed with that child. Someone had taught them this. Someone had decided a life was a tool. The team fought their way clear, hard, costly, but alive. When it ended, the silence felt different. Not relief. Contamination. Back at base, Sarah scrubbed her hands until the skin reddened. She couldn't wash away the image of the small figure disappearing into the compound. She sat alone afterward, head bowed, elbows on her knees. This time, Hartley didn't speak first. I should have fired, she said finally. He looked at her, on a child. On the threat, she snapped, then her voice softened, on the setup. You did what you could with the information you had. It wasn't enough, she whispered. He didn't argue. Because sometimes it was. That night, she dreamed of her brother. Not the battlefield. Home. He was sitting on the porch steps, younger, laughing, cleaning his rifle like it was a hobby instead of a lifeline. "You look tired," he said. "So do you," she replied. He smiled. "That's how you know it matters." She woke before dawn, eyes burning, chest tight. The next mission came faster than she expected. High-value target, confirmed, Mobile. The intelligence was solid. Too solid. They tracked the convoy through winding terrain, Sarah guiding from above, her focus sharpened by unease she couldn't name. "Something off," she said again. Hartley didn't question it this time. "What do you need?" "Time," she answered, "and space." He gave her both. She watched the convoy for 20 minutes before she saw it, the absence. No scouts, no decoys. It was bait. "They want us close," she said. "They're hiding something bigger." Before a decision could be made, the ground erupted. A buried IED detonated beneath the lead vehicle, flipping it like a toy. The blast wave knocked Sarah flat, her head ringing as she rolled, instinctively shielding the rifle. She scrambled back into position, heart pounding. Below, chaos. Smoke, fire, shouting. She forced herself to breathe. This was where people froze. She wouldn't. She took out the heavy gunner first, then the RPG team, then another. But the enemy kept coming. More than before. Better prepared. She felt the pressure building, not just tactical but personal. The creeping thought that maybe survival wasn't the victory she'd once believed it to be. "Overwatch, we're running out of room," Hartley said. Strain edged his voice. She scanned frantically. There. A narrow ravine behind the convoy. Not ideal, but possible. "Fall back to my mark," she said. "I'll cover." They moved. She stayed. She didn't count shots anymore. She counted outcomes. Her shoulders screamed, her vision blurred, sweat stung her eyes. Still she fired. Still she held. Until the last man was clear. Then she moved. The extraction was rough, ugly, successful. Back at base, Sarah collapsed onto a bench, hands shaking uncontrollably now. She stared at them as if they belonged to someone else. Survival. Again. She expected relief. Instead, she felt hollow. Colonel Davis found her there. "You're burning out," he said plainly. She didn't deny it. "You've carried more than your share," he continued. "At some point, strength becomes weight." She looked up at him. "If I stop carrying it, who does?" He had no answer. That night, she stood alone on the perimeter, watching the dark stretch endlessly beyond the wire. She thought about the child, the trap, the cost of seeing patterns others missed, and the cost of missing the ones you didn't. She realized then that redemption wasn't a straight line. It curved. It doubled back. It asked more of you the closer you got. Her radio crackled softly, a routine check. She answered, because that's what she did. And in the quiet between transmissions, Sarah Brennan understood something that scared her more than any ambush. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of surviving long enough to forget why she cared. So she held onto that fear. Not as weakness, but as proof she was still human. And as long as she remembered that, she could keep going. Why did the end never feel like victory? The night air was cold and thin, carrying the distant sounds of generators and boots on gravel. Sarah Brennan stood at the edge of the base, rifle slung low, helmet resting beside her on a crate. Beyond the wire, the dark stretched endlessly, indifferent to everything that had happened within it. This was supposed to be the quiet part. She had survived enough missions now that people assumed she would always survive the next one. That was the strange cruelty of competence. It became invisible the moment it proved reliable. Her orders sat folded in her pocket. She hadn't opened them yet. Behind her, the base moved on. New rotations arriving, others packing up, war behaving the way it always did, continuing without ceremony. She finally unfolded the paper. Reassignment, stateside training command. They were sending her home. Not as punishment, as recognition. Her chest tightened. She should have felt relieved. She didn't. Home meant distance. Distance meant time. Time meant memory. She had learned what happened when the noise stopped. Footsteps approached. She didn't turn. "You going to tell me," Hartley said quietly, "or am I reading it on the roster tomorrow?" She handed him the orders. He read them once, then again. "They're right," he said eventually. "You've given everything you can hear." "That's what scares me," she replied. He looked at her then, really looked at her, not as a commander, not as a teammate, as someone who had seen too much of the same road. "You think leaving means quitting," he said. She didn't answer, because part of her did. "Let me tell you something," Hartley continued. "The best leaders I ever had weren't the ones who stayed until they broke. They were the ones who knew when to step back so others could step forward." She stared into the dark. "I don't know who I am without this," she admitted. He nodded. "None of us do at first." They stood in silence, listening to the hum of the bass. "I trusted you with my people," Hartley said finally. "That doesn't end because you change locations." She closed her eyes briefly. The final mission came at dawn. Routine, low risk, observation only. Those were the ones that lingered. She took her position one last time, settling into the earth as if it might remember her shape. The rifle felt familiar in her hands, an extension of discipline and restraint. As the sun rose, she scanned the valley. Nothing moved. She waited. Minutes passed. Then she saw it. A lone figure on a distant path, unarmed, walking slowly, not hiding. She watched until the figure disappeared beyond a bend. No threat. No decision. Just life continuing. She felt something inside her ease. The extraction came without incident. No shots fired. No heroics. Just quiet competence. As the helicopter lifted, Sarah looked down at the land one last time. Not with longing, not with regret. With gratitude. Back at base, the team gathered without ceremony. Handshakes, nods, the unspoken understanding that this was goodbye not because of loss, but because of change. Rodriguez stood on crutches, grinning. "You still owe me a beer," he said. She smiled. "I don't forget debts." The flight home was long. She slept for the first time without dreaming. Stateside felt unreal, clean, bright, safe in a way that made her shoulders tense. At the training facility, she stood in front of a new group of operators, younger, eager, unscarred. They waited for her to speak. She didn't start with tactics. She started with a question. Who here thinks strength is about being the loudest in the room? A few hands rose, some hesitation. She nodded. "Good, now forget that." She taught them patience, awareness, responsibility. She taught them that the hardest part of the job wasn't pulling the trigger, it was knowing when not to. Weeks later, she visited Arlington. She stood before her brother's headstone, the marble cool beneath her fingers. "I made it back," she said quietly. The wind stirred the trees. She didn't apologize. She didn't promise. She just stood there, breathing, present. As she turned to leave, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not because everything had been justified. Not because every life had been saved. But because she had acted with integrity when it mattered, and carried the cost without letting it harden her. Sometimes strength doesn't shout. Sometimes dignity doesn't demand recognition. Sometimes it lies in the choice to act, to protect, to step forward, and when the moment passes to step away. And in the end, that was enough.